Hey guys, Stealth here. In this video I'm reviewing Hardlycriket's deck. He sent this in to me with the question of having a look at it to see how it can be improved. It's designed to take on 10v10 tactical games, and we are looking at a USSR Motorized deck. So he's using this thing in a low point tactical game, and that's something that makes a lot of difference because it means that you're going to have to upvet your infantry, and especially since it's a motorized deck, he states that he's going to take forests and towns. So that's something we need to have a look at, and that's something we need to keep in mind. So I think that in logistics it all looks solid. He has a bit high on the logistics slots, I think. You could say that 6 UAZs is enough, but especially if you're taking towns, these commando infantry could be very, very effective. So no argument there. Of course you got your regular Ural, you got your FOB, your MI6, and a BTR 70k. Now, these things do have some armor, but I don't really see that much of an advantage of the BTR 70k versus the UAZ. The UAZ is pretty much one-shottable by artillery if they can find it, but you get more. You get 7 of these vehicles. So this is something that you could say, well, maybe you want to switch to the UAZ. Also, the stealth values on these things don't matter at all, so it's not something that is going to get detected harder or easier than the other one. On the other hand, having 7 command vehicles in here is usually enough. So we're going to move on to infantry. He's got a ton of Motostrelki. This is a large pool of Motostrelki to have. Now I know he's going into towns. So with those Motostrelki you can really secure a lot of towns, but I think that this is too many. I usually prefer to have a little less units and making sure that that way I can deploy more experienced units and better micromanage them. Also having fewer units, so not groups of 30 or 40 at a time. I'm not sure if that's the way he plays, but based on what I'm seeing here, that's what my estimate is. Having groups of 3 or 4 in a town makes it particularly vulnerable to artillery. Especially if you have 4 groups of Motostrelki and some BDRs, you're not giving the points away, but you're providing a very tempting target. Now it is a motorized deck, so my favorites, the VDVs, are unfortunately not in here. And neither are the Morskaya Pikota, so he has to go with the standard infantry and the Spetsnaz. But with this much guys, he has a very, very high amount. And I would suggest switching out, for example, one card of these. And going with, let's see, those are out, the BTR 80s. Going with veterans. Because those are going to be a little more effective. Looking at the Motostrelki and the BTR 80, he had 13, which I still think is a very high amount. And I would switch them to 2 times 9. Because that also makes the BTR itself more effective. And this thing with an autocannon and some armor can be very lethal. The more veterancy it gets, the more effective it's going to be, also accuracy wise. So this is why I would go with higher veterancy. And this still leaves him with plenty of infantry. Over here alone you got 36 groups of infantry, and that should be more than enough to take a town or a forest in a 10v10. He also has some Gornostrelki. These are coming in an Mi-24D. He picked 13. This is another one that I would switch to trained, or switch to veteran. Because this way you got a little bit more accuracy, and they do carry 8 of these pretty deadly missiles, 26 AP power. So you want those things to hit. Also, I think that you rarely, if ever, use more than 9. I'm thinking of the South Korean game I did. I didn't have any HGMs in there because I was taking forests. I suppose that in towns they could be useful. Although you already have your Motostrelki, but the standoff capability of this Metis M is very nice to have, of course. Still, I think that you can go with 9 at veteran. And of course you're also getting an upvetted Mi-24D with that, which may give the Fleita a bit more chance to hit, and that also gives you another capable HGM. Again, it's not the best, but you get it on the chopper anyway, so you might as well use it. Next he has 2 cards of Spetsnaz. He has one card in the BT, or sorry, two cards in the BTR 80. These are both elite, so that's good. The one change I would make here is having one of these cards not in the BTR 80, but in the Mi-24A, because this is more of a quick reaction force. You can deploy these guys with the Mi-24A, which travels at 330, which is already twice the speed of the BTR 80. And of course the BTR 80 has to stick to roads, whereas these guys just fly over it. You only lose 2 Spetsnaz this way. It still gives you plenty of guys. You got 16 Spetsnaz, and with it you also get a pretty capable attack chopper. Pretty because it doesn't have that capable weapons on it. It's just got a machine gun, some older rocket pods which are barely accurate, and a Phalanga, but hey, for 45 points you might as well use it. So, moving on to support. Let's see what he has here. We can see a Beryusa, a Strela, an Osa, and a Urugan, and a Nona artillery. Now, starting off with these Beryusas. These guys are very good at taking down helicopters and stunning planes, and he has 9 of these. Combined with the fact that he already has quite a bit of AA infantry in here. He got 7 of these Iglas, which are veterans, so they are very likely to hit. Combined with that, I think you have enough if you use 7 Beryusas. Not 9, but 7, which gives you that tiny bit more accuracy. But that could make the difference between actually stunning the plane or killing the helicopter and not having it killed, which could lead to the destruction of your forces. So I would switch this one out and put it in at trained. The Strela is at hardened, and this is also a very capable helicopter fighter. Now you see, the problem that this deck has mostly is taking down airplanes, because the only long range options that they have is the OSA line. So you could say that he could consider not going with the Strela, but instead going with, for example, the OSA AK, because this is a 40-point AA platform, carries 6 of these missiles, and it's pretty mobile. The Strela is pretty much only good at one thing, which is taking down helicopters, and you also got your Beryusas and your infantry. Now, if you're doing a lot of forest fighting or jungle fighting, you could say that you could switch out one of these Motostrelkis. That still leaves you with a lot of infantry, and then deploy one additional card of Iglas. Because in my South Korean gameplay, which I uploaded a couple days earlier, I had these Mistral launchers, or the Mistral infantry, in the forests, and they did a lot of good work. So I was definitely convinced by the capability of the AA infantry, and the Iglas are only slightly worse in the sense that they have a little less range. So it depends on your preference. You could go with one Igla, then a Strela and a Beryusa, or you could say, well, I'm going to go with one less card of Motostrelki and then pick one of the BTR 80s, or switch these out, get an additional card of Iglas in, and then remove the Strela and switch it for an OSA AK or an AKM to get that additional defense against airplanes. The Urugan, I barely ever use it because I don't think that these things are that effective. I do really like the Nonas, and especially if you're doing forest fighting, it's very nice to have Nonas in support. The Urugans, the BM-27s, are really only good at stunning larger groups of units, but rarely killing them because they're not that accurate. If you like using them, by all means keep them in. I personally wouldn't bring them in, and would possibly bring in maybe another card of Nonas, or maybe something in a different tab altogether. Looking at the tanks, he's bringing in 11 T-55 AMVs. These are the only tanks he can bring in which are around the 60-point price tag. These things have a decent main cannon, a decent ATGM, it's not stellar, and a machine gun. They got 11 armor, 60 kph. He's bringing in 11, which I think is good because they're hardened and not the standard trained version. The question is, what is he going to do with these? Don't make the mistake of using these things to take down tanks. That is not the super heavies, because they're just going to laugh at you. Go through your 11 frontal armor and possibly 2 or 3 shot this tank. But if you go hunting for lighter vehicles, anti-tank warfare, IFVs, APCs, stuff like that, you got a decent chance of doing quite some damage. Not a lot I would change here. Some people like to spam T-34-85s, that's never been my preference, but you do get a load of those, you get 24. But they, I think they are so bad that they rarely, if ever, make their own 15-point grade. Alternatives, depending on how mobile you want to get, you could go with the BMP 685 instead of the T-55. You're going to sacrifice some armor, but you're going to gain some ability. And especially in forests, having that little bit extra speed might help you get to your location faster. Also, if you're doing in-forest fighting, the armor doesn't really matter very much. So whether you're using a 30-point vehicle with 3 armor or a 60-point vehicle with 11 armor doesn't really matter. And the gun on these things is slightly more accurate but has less punch. So in this case, it's debatable which one you use. Let me know what you think is the right option in this case by letting me know in the comments down below. Moving on to recon. He has a lot of infantry recon over here. 2 cards of 4 Spetsnaz GRU, 2 cards of Spetsnaz VMF, 1 Plamia and 1 KA-52. Now I think that, especially since he has 4 cards of these, he could mix it up a little. I think that he's using the Spetsnaz GRU in a pretty offensive role, seeing that they're all brought in by a BTR 70. They could be brought in by an Mi-24D or an Mi-24A, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. And as again, with the Spetsnaz in the Infantry tab, I do like to have that flexibility. So in my case, I would switch out 1 Spetsnaz GRU out of the BTR 70s and put them in the Mi-24Ds. Does make them expensive, but it does give you an Mi-24D at Elite, and those are quite capable of doing a lot of damage. The Spetsnaz VMF, those are sniper teams, he does have those mixed up. So he has 1 in the BTR 70 and 1 in the Mi-24D. Unfortunately, these BTR-As are of very limited supply, but they are very nice to have with that autocannon. Alternative option is the BTR-80. Doesn't really matter much for the BTR 70 for this 80, but the 80 gets a bit more accuracy. You pay exactly the same price for that. Let's see if there's any other differences. I think that this thing, the BTR 80, is a general upgrade over the BTR 70. He only has 1 more unit available though. So since these guys won't see a lot of combat, but these guys might, I would switch out 1 BTR 70 and get the Spetsnaz GRU in a BTR 80, because they have a little bit more accuracy, a little bit more armor, and no other penalties. Otherwise, the setup looks good. You could say that having a T-55 recon tank is very, very nice to have. And especially since he has 16 recon infantry in here, I think it's on the high end. But if you're doing a lot of jungle or forest warfare, it's nice to have recon infantry. On the other hand, there are circumstances where this deck might not be used in a town or in a forest. And in those situations you could go with 1 card less of, for example, the Spetsnaz VMF, and switch in 1 T-55 card. Otherwise, you don't get that many interesting options. You do get the BRDM-3, and you get a quite high number of those. They also have medium stealth, good optics, and an autocannon, and this would be a nice to have. And especially since you get 9 of those, looking at this now, I would say switch out 1 of these and bring in 9 of these, because that autocannon can help out your infantry if they're doing a forced fight, take out some vehicles, and help with anti-infantry defense or anti-infantry attacks. This still gives you 12 recon infantry, more than enough Spetsnaz VMF, because I rarely use these sniper teams, but these guys can actually fight. So these are more of the passive spotters. So Recon looks good. Moving on to vehicles, where he has the Jalo and 2 cards of Concours M. This is interesting because in forced fighting I would have expected a T-55 napalm tank. So this is where I would switch out 1 Concours, because if you're doing a lot of fighting in towns and jungles and forests, I don't think that you really need a BRDM2. It doesn't have the lead time that it needs, nor the armor. So I would switch out one of those. Get a TO55 in there. 9 at veteran because it gives him a little bit more stun reduction, a little bit more accuracy and morale recovery. So switch it in like that. These Conquerors, it's nice to have them in. It depends on where you want to use them though. They do have a very good amount of missiles, so they got 10 of those. Let's see, keeping an eye on the fact that he wants to do forest fighting. You could say that the BTR-90 is a better alternative, because if you compare it to the Concours, you're going to see that the BTR-90 has a bit more missiles on it, and it gets an autocannon. I think this is just an overall upgrade over the BRDM Concours. So let's delete the Concours and bring in the BTR-90. Now these guys are very few in number if you only bring 4, so you could say that bringing 7 in this case is okay, because they already got a good amount of accuracy, and having more of these could be an interesting trade-off versus having the lower veterancy, or the higher veterancy. I'm not saying that his setup of having 8 BRDM2 Concours M was wrong, but I think that this is going to work a bit better in forest fighting and town fighting, because having napalm on tanks I found is very, very effective. Especially if you have, for example, a lot of weakened infantry on your end, and there's a lot of high-end infantry coming in. Using a napalm tank and just putting down a wall of flame is going to slow them down, which gives you time to retreat, gives you time to rearm and reinforce your own troops, and then you can push back out once the flames have died down. So that's how I would use the TO55. He's got quite a bit of helicopters in here. 4 Mi-24Vs, 6 Mi-24VPs and 2 Akulas. That's pretty much all the high-end helicopters he can get, except for the Mi-28. Now these guys are armed with the Iglas. They are very, very nice to have, and you can rarely if ever have enough of these things. They do have a good accuracy, especially on the Igla, 55%, and they can fire those in full flight as well. So having 2 of these at hardened is a very good choice. Having 2 of these cards, you could say it's overrated, maybe, but I think it's nice to have these. Mi-24 VP, very, very capable helicopter, especially because it carries a lot of rockets and this twin autocannon. It's going to do a lot of damage, and especially with the Kokon Ms, it's a big threat to tanks. He's using 2 cards at hardened, so that is a good choice. You could say that you could swap out one of these Mi-24 VPs and bring in an Mi-28, which gives you another slightly different attack option, because these things carry 16 of these HEGMs, the Mi-28 that is, and versus the 8 HEGMs on the Kokon M or on the Mi-24, it gives you a bit more anti-tank capability. Also, this autocannon is a bit more accurate than the twin autocannon on the Mi-24 VP, or actually I should say a lot more accurate, because they got more than twice the accuracy, both stabilized and in hanging still, so hovering. So in this situation I would switch out 1 Mi-24 VP and bring in 2 Mi-28s. This gives you quite a bit of anti-tank capability. Now I know that he already had those in the Akula, but in the Akula you got a bit of different weapon systems and you don't get these very accurate, very nice rocket pods. So having a flight of these things together, especially backed up by a Ka-52 Recon, you have a very deadly helicopter hunter group. Final tab, air. Looks like he went full air superiority. This is 2 cards of Su-27S, 2 single cards of Su-27PU, and 1 card of Su-27Ms, which are tank snipers. Now he wanted to improve his armor killing ability. He definitely solved that using the SU-27M. And armor killing ability with a motorized deck is always something that's pretty hard. But we fixed it with the helicopters, we fixed it with the infantry, and somewhat with the vehicles, with the BTR-90s. But I think that this is a bit much in the air superiority front. Especially having 4 of these guys is too much. In a low point 10v10 tactical, what this deck is designed for, I would go with 1 card of SU-27PU, and then stuff which can possibly support my front lines. Now he does have quite a bit of helicopters, he has 11 of these in here. And especially if you want to use this SU-27M, having a seaplane would be a worthy addition, not only to yourself but also to your team. In this case I'm going to go with the MiG-25BM because it gets the best ratio on it. It gets these 4 KH-50 BU or 58U, whatever. These seed missiles have a better range, better accuracy, and the seed on this thing, or the ECM on this thing, is a lot better. So 1 at hardened, and this is not only to support your helicopters in taking down AA, but also in having your allies being capable of supporting you. Because once you take down a couple of the AA platforms using the seed missiles, you can do quite a bit of damage, or your allies can do quite a bit of damage with their air force. Finally, you could bring in a multi-role, a bomber, an anti-tank, although he has anti-tank in the form of the SU-27M, so we don't really need that. It depends on what you like. If you want your unit to survive, I would go with something that has high ECM, so that puts us more in the multi-role tab. You could go with a MiG-29M, which drops cluster bombs. You could go with the SU-25T, which is very capable of taking down armor. But I think that we already have plenty of anti-armor capability in this deck. So what we need is possibly these MiG-21 BIS, because these with their rocket pods do quite a bit of damage versus infantry. Unfortunately they don't have any ECM, so that eliminates this option. You could go with MiG-29S or M. It depends on what you want to target. I think that in this case the MiG-29S is the better choice because it gives you free-falling HE bombs, not cluster bombs. This makes them effective. Excuse me. This makes them effective versus both infantry, vehicles, and tanks to somewhat of an effect. Of course, they're not as effective as cluster bombs. But I think that the HE bomb application is a bit wider than the one on the cluster bomb. So I would go with 2 cards of MiG-29S because they're just there as delivery trucks to deliver those bombs, and they already have 40% ECM. So some slight additions here and there. Again, it's not that his deck was wrong or bad. If that is what he got a 95% win ratio with, I'm happy. So these are just all suggestions that I'm making. The deck code of this, I'm going to say improved or new or changed deck is in the description below if you want to change it for yourself. Have a look at it. Let me know what you think in the description or in the comments below, because there might be something that I overlooked, or there might be something that you have found to work particularly well. Just keep in mind that this deck was designed to go into towns, forests, and clearing out other infantry. So that is something that this deck is geared towards, and that is the application that you need to keep in mind when making additions or suggestions for this deck. If you want me to review your deck, I can do that. The link on how you can do that is in the description below. Just send me your deck and I can have a look at it, make some improvements, or at least give my feedback on it. Hope you had fun watching this video. Hardlycriket, if you're watching this, I hope that you can use this deck to great effect, and maybe we could play a game together sometime. For now, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit like. If you want to see more, subscribe to my channel. And I hope to see you all in the next video.